Thank you this morning for joining us for our part 2 of Stand Day at the Capitol. So we're really grateful this morning to be joined by Representative Ben Toma. He's from Legislative District 22. We hope to be joined by Representative Blackman and Representative Rodriguez as well. I'll go ahead and read all their bios. We have super short bios. And I'll go ahead and read them all in case they show up so you know who's here. And then we'll start the rest of our program. So we're so grateful, Mr. Toma, for your attendance this morning. Representative Ben Toma was born in Romania and came to America in pursuit of the American dream in 1987. He's been living in the West Valley since 1996. He married his wife, Ani, in 1998, and together they have 5 daughters in the Deer Valley School District. His professional experience includes serving on the Peoria City Council and making a career as a real estate broker. Representative Thoma is committed to responsible government, family values, and improving our quality of life in Arizona. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Thoma.
Thanks.
Thanks. And I'll just share a little bit about the other 2 in case they show up. Representative Walter Blackman is the Republican who won the 2018 midterm general elections for state representative for the 6th legislative district. With his election win, he's the first Black American Republican in the history of Arizona elected to the Arizona House of Representatives. Walt is a constitutionalist conservative who served in the United States Army for 21 years. Thank you so much for your service. He currently serves as the chairman of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee in the Arizona House of Representatives. And Representative Diego Rodriguez is an ardent supporter of public education, a livable wage so that our working families do not have to work 2 or 3 jobs to support their families, criminal justice reform in order to invest more money into mental health and good schools instead of private prisons that only hurt our economic growth, and providing good paying jobs. Thank you so much. Hopefully all 3 of you will be here soon, and we are recording this and we'll be posting it in the future. I also want to thank our parents joining us today, our community leaders, and also our STAND staff that's been working so hard to put these together. Stand for Children's mission is to ensure that every child graduates high school prepared for college or meaningful career, regardless of the child's zip code or background. We are particularly focused on children and families who are overlooked because of language, ethnicity, disability, or economic status. As part of that mission, we launched Stand Day at the Capitol in 2018, bringing hundreds of parents from school districts around the Valley to learn about civic engagement. They went on tours, met their legislators, and learned a lot about how they make a difference. This year, we had to do things a bit differently, so let me share how this will work today. First, I'll give a brief overview of the issue today, criminal justice reform, and then I'll ask a series of discussion questions that will also be interspersed with questions from STAND parents that have joined us on Zoom. We're using the Zoom translation function, as I mentioned, so again, it's really important that you select English or Spanish by clicking on the little globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Anyone on Zoom can also put a question or comment in the chat, and I'll select some of those to share with our panel or our guest. We're also joined by viewers on Facebook Live. They'll be asking questions on Facebook as well, and I'll be able to repeat some of them to the panel as appropriate. And as I mentioned, later we'll post the whole recording on Facebook, and we'll also be editing it down to smaller lengths for social media. So now on to today's topic. I want to start by sharing why Stand for Children has become interested in this. Our organization was created about 25 years ago by Marian Wright Edelman, and she was a civil rights leader who worked alongside Martin Luther King Jr. and founded the Children's Defense Fund. So about 25 years ago, the Children's Defense Fund decided to have a march in Washington at the Capitol that they called Stand for Children. And the idea that came out of that is that education is a civil rights issue and is the key to equity and achieving economic success for all Americans. So fast forward about 5 years ago, as an organization, we became very interested in the concept, a phrase that I don't like, called the school to prison pipeline. But the idea that somebody's reading skill in 3rd grade could predict whether or not they might end up in the court system or in prison was very disturbing to us. And so we started looking into those types of issues. Our entire organization went to Montgomery, Alabama, and became involved with EJI, and you might know them from the book and the movie Just Mercy, written by Brian Stevenson. So when we all got back from Alabama, we got to work in Arizona researching the issue, and here's what we learned. In Arizona, African American youth are 4 times more likely than white youth to be incarcerated. Meanwhile, it can cost up to $149,000 per year to imprison a child, but only about $8,000 per year for public education. And in Arizona, the state requires family to pay some of the cost of confinement. We also learned that Arizona was the birthplace of due process rights for youth in juvenile courts. In the 1967 case in Rico, the Supreme Court held that young people are entitled to constitutional rights, such as the right to counsel. Yet today, we learned that Arizona state law authorizes courts to charge attorney's fees and other fees, which limits access to counsel for youth in the juvenile system. In Arizona, thousands of youth interact with the juvenile system each year and could be charged detention, diversion, probation, and attorney's fees. There are 3,500 detained youth, 7,750 youth in diversion, and 3,500 youth sentenced to standard probation. The fees can add up to over $1,000 for a family, though the total revenue for the state courts from these fees is less than 0.3%, and that's of the statewide court revenue, less than 0.3% for these fees. Yet the monthly earnings for a minimum wage full-time job is about $2,000 a month. So it's about half a month's wages for a family to pay these fees, while it ends up being a very, very small portion of the court revenue. Beyond the impact of the court fees, we found national research on the overall impact of incarceration on children. Nationally, 1 in 3 Americans has some type of criminal record, and 1 in 2 children has a parent with a criminal record. With nearly 9 in 10 employers, 4 out of 5 landlords, and 3 out of 5 colleges now using background checks, any record, no matter how old or minor, can put employment, housing, education, and other basics permanently out of reach. Formerly incarcerated people are nearly 10 times more likely than the general public to experience homelessness. So thinking about that in context of the nearly half of American children who now have at least one parent with a criminal record, it's easy to see how homelessness among children is a problem that's related to criminal justice reform. The barriers associated with a parent's record can result in long-lasting family economic instability and severely limit a child's life chances, hampering children's cognitive development, school performance, educational attainment, and employment and earnings in adulthood. So I'll wrap this up with some good news. People with criminal records who have remained crime-free for 4 to 7 years are no more likely than the general population to commit a new crime. So reform makes a difference. So let's start the discussion with a general question about the current landscape around criminal justice reform. And so it looks like, Mr. Toma, this is going to be all you. And And I apologize for that, but we're very, very grateful for your participation.
Rebecca, this is
Rebecca.
Representative Rodriguez. I'm here as well.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, thank you. Oh, there you are. Sorry, we have 4 different screens of people, so I missed you.
And
Thank
Rebecca,
you.
I'm here also.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Blackman. I really appreciate you all being here. And I gave your bios a little earlier, so everybody's familiar with your great work in this field. And we do have a recording, so if you want to go back and see what I said, you can watch the recording. And so I'll go ahead and start the conversation. So our first question for the 3 of you: as legislators, you're often approached with policy ideas, and you're often invited to learn about or visit best practices and model programs. Could you each share with us some bright spots in criminal justice reform that you've seen and would like to see replicated?
That's a really good question. Well, I will tell you that my personal experience in the courts is I've seen many of my clients go through drug court. So drug court is an alternative to pushing someone through the regular criminal justice system. It gives them a chance to get into treatment. It's supported by the probation officers. The judges are actively involved as well. The drug court judge is actively involved as well. And it's a way to keep folks one step farther away from incarceration. We've been working hard to try to increase those types of diversion programs. Those are the types of programs that work. They give people of lower income the opportunity to, in a sense, go to rehab, because in this country, we have a huge gap between those who can afford to go to rehab and those who end up using county jails and our state prisons as their rehab program. So the more that we can help folks get into those pre-incarceration diversion programs, the better. So I would love to see us really get much more aggressive on treatment and counseling when it comes to people who are arrested in possession of drugs, rather than punishing them by sending them to prison.
I would say, well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And if I knew Rodriguez was going to be here, I just wouldn't have shown up. But seriously, though, I would tell you, the way that I envision the Criminal Justice Reform Committee is exactly how it is turning out, where we know criminal justice touches every aspect of life, touches just about everybody. You either know someone or yourself or a cousin or somebody, a friend has been touched by the criminal justice system here in Arizona. So it touches everyone just about. And I wanted the committee to kind of be built around that, to where it is bipartisan, and because these issues are bipartisan. Anyone can end up in our criminal justice system, as Representative Rodriguez knows very well. You know, he's an attorney, and him and I talk often about it. And some of the issues that that he has basically kind of taught me about, or brought me up to speed about, will make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. So I wanted the reform, the Criminal Justice Reform Committee, to kind of speak to that and get away from the politics, or get away from the party line. I would say that our committee is the only committee that has worked for everyone, and just not me and Representative Rodriguez. Everyone on the committee has worked across the aisles because of this, because of the problem in Arizona, and we've got a lot of work to do. And Representative Rodriguez, his office is right around the corner from mine, and I think that's a good thing, because you know, we can always have the off the record meetings about things that we want to do, so.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Toma, would you like to add anything?
Sure, briefly. You know, I think you're seeing, at least within the legislature, a broad consensus, at least within the House, I should say, that criminal justice reform is very important, and that we need to actually make some significant changes, and that's why you see a committee dedicated to that. And as a matter of fact, in my capacity as the majority leader, the only committee that I sit on outside of the rules is the Criminal Justice Reform Committee, and I think that's a signal to the gravity of the importance, I should say, that we put in this particular topic. Now, I personally have had my own experience with being in class and not understanding and the language barrier and whatnot, at least at first. And then, as a child, that's the blessed thing, is that children are very adaptable and very quick to learn and languages in particular. So I've had that experience, and I can see how it could have gone a different way. I don't have a personal experience with the criminal justice system, and that's a good thing. And I don't wish it upon anyone, but I do think that my perspective on it, one based on the just my personal history, but in addition to that, it's just sort of the outside observer looking at it and going, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? And taking these issues one at a time. And I think Mr. Blackman mentioned it, touched on it briefly, but it's very important that we recognize that the issues here are complicated, and that they're because they're so complicated, we really need to take the time and make sure that what we do is going to be helpful in the long run. And I think you're going to see a desire from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats combined on this, that we really do want to make sure that we give the time and the effort to understand these issues and to ensure that the reforms that we make are going to be beneficial for the state long run and for all the people that it affects.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as you could see from the introduction, there's a lot of connections between youth and adults, and there's a lot to unpack, and we really appreciate your committee's work on this. We do have a question from a parent. Mervyn Medina from LD22 would like to ask a question.
Well, first of all, hi everyone. And my question is, what are you most passionate about it? Like, what does inspire you most by this topic?
Sure, well, I guess I'll take the first shot since you're LD22, you're my constituent. Nice to meet you digitally here. I think to me it's just the basic question, or the basic principle that everyone deserves to be treated as fairly as possible. And on a personal level, specific to criminal justice reform, the thing that I'm most passionate about is the idea of second chances. That's just me. So, I've made mistakes in my life as well, plenty of them. And if people didn't give me second chances, I would never have been successful to any extent. And so I do think that the criminal justice system also deserves second chances. So as a matter of fact, I think Rebecca mentioned in her introductory speech that once someone, for example, has gone through the process, has done the time, whatever that sentence was and whatnot, 4 years after, and once that time has passed, they're actually less likely to offend than or no more likely to offend than anyone else. And I've seen certain studies actually that seem to suggest that there may be even less likely, actually, because they truly know the cost and they've experienced it. And so the bill that I'm most proud of, that I've sponsored and fought for, as Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Blackman both know, is the record ceiling. It's not really expungement, but it's a record ceiling. It's really a second chances bill to remove that scarlet letter, that scarlet F, felon, right? Because in the future, you might do something foolish when you're 18 or 19, and then you realize the cost when you're well into 30s, 40s, and 50s, and that to me seems fundamentally unfair. And so I'm passionate about that, and I think the committee is well aware that I'm passionate about that, as is the House. And I'm pleased to say that it went out of the House, I think only one no vote out of the House of that bill just last week. So that's my answer.
I would say with Majority Leader Thoma's the ceiling bill, I think that's a great bill, because of we live in a country of redemption. I mean, and as Representative Thoma said so well, is that everyone makes mistakes. And the last person that I know that doesn't make mistakes is Christ. And so everybody else on this planet and in this state has probably done something that they're not proud of. And the difference between some of those folks and the people that are caught up in the system is that the latter they got caught. The first thing we need to, and I've always been a victim focused kind of guy. But when you drill down and you're talking to some of the victims, all they want is just peace of mind that the justice system played out well, and that the person is able to get out of prison and do the right thing. It's the criminal justice hawks are the ones that are pushing a lot of the issues that we see surrounding criminal justice. So a passion of mine is, everyone deserves respect and dignity. There are some people that have done things that need to be locked up, and there are some people that just have made mistakes. But the problem is when we have individuals, for example, there's a gentleman that's been out of prison for 30 years. He had an impeccable record while he was in prison, hasn't committed one crime. He's done all his probation tells, paid back his restorations, but he still doesn't have his rights restored. When do we as a society say, okay, you have paid your debt to society, and now we want you to continue, we want you to be productive in the community. But what we're doing is we're setting roadblocks for folks that are getting out. And a passion of mine is to remove those roadblocks so we can have a robust success rate on these folks that want to contribute and want to be positive and want to get back to their community. And there are many people out there that have those roadblocks that can't move forward. So a passion of mine is removing those roadblocks from them, as long as they're willing to do the work.
So I guess it's my turn now. One of the passions that drives me is the fact that we spend well over $1 billion a year for our budget in DOC, $1.3 billion to the Department of Corrections. We have over 42,000 people incarcerated in Arizona. That is a huge number. So to the extent that we can address the problem of over-incarceration or mass incarceration in Arizona, that's where my passion lies. Because if we can start to shift the resources that we spend unnecessarily, quite frankly, very unnecessarily when it comes to nonviolent drug offenders, it still boggles my mind that we keep insisting on sending people to prison who have a drug problem. There's a better way to do that, much more affordable, and it will help our communities, because the money that we spend to incarcerate people, to send people to prison, that's money that we're not spending on schools. It's money that we're not spending on early childhood development. It's money that we're not spending on neighborhood support programs. It's money that we're not spending on libraries. It's money that we're not spending on teachers. It's money that we're not spending on books. All of this has a real world cost. If we're spending $24,000 a year to incarcerate an adult, and that's just a rough estimate, just think about how much money we would save if we could get those folks into diversion programs, get those folks into other types of community-based supervision, where we're not spending billions of dollars on our prisons. So my passion is to try to educate the citizens of Arizona, to let them know that it is possible to hold people accountable when they commit crimes. It's possible to do so in a way that's respectful of the process, it's respectful of victims, make sure that people are made whole. But at the same time, we need to start looking at what we're doing, because it isn't working. If you look at effective criminal justice policy, isn't just about how many people are in prison, and it isn't just about the crime rate. It's about, are we making our communities stronger while at the same time holding people accountable and protecting the victims' rights as well? And that's the conversation that we need to have. But again, that's why this problem is so incredibly difficult, because it does touch every single part of our society. And just, I would also like to just acknowledge the level of cooperation that we do have. Mr. Blackman spoke about this earlier. The level of cooperation we have on the Criminal Justice Reform Committee it's unheard of. I don't have anything else I can compare it to in my time in the legislature. And granted, I haven't been there for that long, but you hear stories, and I can tell you that it's simply a matter of the members who sit on that committee and Mr. Blackman setting the tone, that we've all just decided to try to do the work and not get caught up on these outside influences that maybe sometimes try to push us in different ways for other reasons.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman, I know you are short on time. We do have a constituent that would like to ask you a question if you do have a quick minute, if that's okay.
Oh, no, I'm scheduled for an hour for this, so I'm good.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I thought you had to leave a little early.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll jump to that section anyway, since I brought it up.
Okay.
So you all, I think, are aware that Stanford children have become interested in the issue of juvenile court fees that young people and their family have to pay. And I very much is grateful for parents who shared their stories, which you saw at the committee a few weeks ago. I want to thank you, Mr. Blackman, for the opportunity for us to share those stories and for sponsoring 2385. And we're looking forward to further work on that. Are there other efforts at the legislature to focus on youth and juvenile justice reform?
Is that directed to me or?
That's to you, and then we have a follow-up from Maria.
Okay, so my intent for the committee is a three-phase intent. So what you are seeing now is the programming that we're trying to set up and getting the right people into those programming. Like Representative Rodriguez said, that it doesn't make any sense to put a person in prison who has a drug problem when you can get drugs in prison just like you can Kool-Aid at Walmart. It's that simple and easy to do. So we want to make sure that we are targeting the right people with a program such as the earned release credit, the diversionary program, so on and so forth. The second phase of that is that we have just kind of missed are the women that are in our prison systems, are the women that go through the criminal justice system. We haven't really touched on that. And that is something that I want to be working with the committee on next session. And to be able to kind of open that up so we can see what's going on. And then the third is the juvenile. We have a problem, and as you know, we have juveniles that are stuck with these large fees, and it follows them for the rest of their lives. And we are basically putting a life sentence on families of these juveniles on a $50 crime. So those are the phases that I'm working in, and then I'm sure that my two colleagues have other those they want to do, and so I'm hoping that we can continue in that direction.
Ms. Rodriguez or Mr. Toma, do you have any thoughts on youth and juvenile justice reform?
Well, I think the bill that was brought, that we considered this session, is very important. I think more folks need to be made aware of that. Quite frankly, I don't think a lot of folks know that outside of the criminal justice arena in the world, that the attorneys who practice or the attorneys who practice in that area know about. So the more light we can shine on that problem, I think the better.
And I agree with that. I think it is something that that we definitely need to understand better.
Es importante que todos.
Oh, Carlos, sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
Oh. Sorry about that. I'm trying to translate on the other channel.
Okay, Mr. Toma, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, well, no worries. I think the only other point that, you know, there is a balance here to some extent as well, and that, by that I mean that generally speaking, it's just human nature in my experience that if it doesn't cost you anything, that a lot of times you don't take it seriously, whatever that situation is. And at the same time, though, in the criminal justice system, as we've seen, there has been just an observation at this point from me personally, an attempt to sort of standardize everything. But the problem with standardizing is that it loses focus on the fact that, or track of the fact that there are certain families that are in different situations than others. And so giving a certain amount of flexibility to judges and to whoever it is, prosecutors or whatever, whoever is pushing the narrative forward, I think is also important to note that not everybody can be treated the same, because every family situation is a little bit different. And so I do think that just overall arching, not specifically to just fees, but overall, you're going to see a push for more judicial discretion in the system. And again, that's a balance that we still have to sort of vet fully, but it is definitely an area of focus for for me personally.
Wonderful, thank you. And so now we have a couple of parent questions. Our first is Maria Vega from LD6. So Maria, would you like to ask your question?
Bueno, yo soy una madre de familia por la que ya pasé por esos problemas y ya conociendo las dificultades que atraviesan nuestros jóvenes cuando intentan tener borrón y cuenta nueva, después de ser parte del sistema de detención juvenil, mi pregunta es, ¿cuáles son los programas o políticas que cree que serían buenos para dar a los jóvenes una segunda oportunidad?
Okay, well, the first thing we need to do when we're dealing, so the question is, as it boils down to, what are the policies and programs that we think might benefit kids who are caught in the juvenile system to give them a second chance? I think what we need to go back and do is let's start off with making sure that they have access to quality schools and quality job training programs. And then make sure that their families have the support that they need so that if they have a child in crisis, that they have access to treatment and counseling if there's a child that runs into that situation as well. So I think sometimes when we hear the word juvenile and we hear the phrase juvenile court, we forget that we're dealing with kids, and so kids make dumb choices all the time. And unfortunately, the way that the system is currently set up, we spoke about the school to prison pipeline. Once a child gets caught inside that pipeline, it becomes more and more difficult to get them out the longer that they remain into it. So one thing that we can do is support our kids when they're in schools, support our kids when they're in the system, give them more access to treatment and counseling, and also family support, because the families are placed under a lot of strain as well. Because if you have single parent homes who are trying to struggle with balancing jobs and raising their children, it becomes very difficult, especially now that we've dealt with the pandemic. The economic pressures have come in as well. So there are many things that we can do. And then also talking about making sure that the kids don't carry this debt forward with them from the cost of the juvenile court is very important as well. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Blackman and Representative Thoma now as well.
Well, first of all, I want to say hello to one of my constituents in LD6. And it looks like that you're working in the medical field, and we want to thank you for that. And I'm glad that my colleague, Representative Rodriguez, translated that, because if he wasn't laughing, then that means you weren't talking about me. So, but to your question, programming. We need to look at where we are with these kids. And when I was a kid growing up, I was fortunate to have a two-parent household. And either my mother was making sure that I did my homework and I did the right thing, and then my father was practicing some tough love on me. And a lot of families don't have that opportunity. And so when we're talking about programming, I'm also talking about mentorship programs. I'm talking about like YMCA or Boys and Girls Clubs and Boy Scouts, things where people can come out and help these children that are juvenile that happen to fall into the system. Now, as my constituent knows, up in LD6, particularly Holbrook, Snowflake, Taylor, Williams, and St. John's, there's not a lot of stuff for juveniles to do. Unless they're in sports, and not everybody can make the football team, basketball team, or the girls' athletics. So we have these kids with all this extra time on their hands, but we don't have a lot of activities or resources to keep them occupied. And just like an adult, if a kid gets bored, one or two things are going to happen. They're going to find something productive to do or something negative to do. And unfortunately, up in our area, we don't have those resources to kind of help kids out. And kids do make mistakes. I have 5 children, and they're grown. They're in their early 20s, and they're making mistakes every day. So we have to have programs that identify these kids at the initial onset. We need to get a community involvement, and I'm not just saying the kind of community involvement where we do a fundraiser and I'm talking about deep dive community involvement to these kids and their families and not only to lower income kids, but to all the kids up there. And that's what I am working on. I'm working on trying to get a Boys and Girls Club up in our area, and trying to push some of those resources in some of those towns that I've mentioned.
Just to add briefly to that, first of all, I agree with the comments that have been made. But in addition to that, I know one example of something concrete that we were doing is that there's a bill that we heard, I believe, just a couple of weeks ago in the committee that I believe it was Representative Joel John's bill that also incented or provides an incentive structure for officers working with people on that are on probation and or on probation tails after coming out of prison or after doing their time. Then the idea there is that there should be incentives on both sides to sort of help keep each other accountable. And I think things that we can do from a government perspective to try to ensure that the incentives are right for both sides, to try to work with people and to get them back on the straight and narrow, instead of trying to figure out some small technicality, going right back into the system and kind of get caught in that cycle that you can't move out from. So I think that's just one example of some of the things we're looking at.
And so I do have one from your district. Fabiola Velasquez has a question as well.
Hola, sí, buenos días. Mi nombre es Fabiola Velázquez. Yo soy madre de familia y tengo una pregunta. A mí me gustaría saber cuál es el proyecto de ley más importante relacionado con la reforma de la justicia penal que está pasando por la legislatura en este momento y por qué es importante.
Sure. Quick answer. In my opinion, there's a tie. I think 2713, which is the increase in earned release credits, is a very important bill that's going through. And then related to that is, I can't remember the number right now, but it is the DOC Oversight Bill to establish an oversight committee and an ombudsman. Those are, I think, both equally important, because the earned release credits bill is going to allow folks to earn additional time off of their sentences if they go through their programs that they're required to do and otherwise are in good conduct while in DOC. It allows us to reduce the population in DOC in a way that folks can understand, and it will give the people who are currently inside prison a goal to shoot for, something that they can work towards and aspire to, and get them into the community quicker. And they will not be released straight into the community. They'll then go complete their sentence under community supervision. So we're not just going to open the doors and let people walk out. It's going to be, you get to earn your way out, and then you have to continue to earn your way through the rest of your sentence by complying with treatment and counseling and whatever else is ordered by your probation officer. The other bill, which is the Oversight Bill, is very important because, as you all know, we have some very significant and serious issues that are going on with the Department of Corrections right now. We have issues with the facilities. We have issues with security. We have issues surrounding the pandemic. We have issues surrounding the lack of accounting controls for inmate money. We have now issues for whether or not the computer program is even able to handle all of the input that it's required, including calculating when people get out of prison, whether that system is actually even accurately calculating that date. And so those two bills are very important. One is on the front end, gives our incarcerated folks something to shoot for and a way for them to wake up in the morning and to think about, hey, what do I need to do today to give myself a better chance of getting out of here a little bit sooner? And then on the back end, making sure that the Department of Corrections is being run safely, securely, and responsibly, which is something that hasn't always been done in the state of Arizona.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman, Mr. Toma, do you have favorite bills of the session? Yeah,
I would say that for a lawmaker always likes their bills, you know. However, with the the bills that have been coming through the committee, I mean, all of them are really good, solid bills that we can build on. Representative Rodriguez has a bill that I'm going to work on with him during the interim, so we can kind of expand some of those credits to folks that are deserving and working hard. The bill that he was also referring to is HB 2167, what is the Oversight Bill. And as you know, our Department of Corrections, they They are hurting right now. And in order for us to get all these bills to help the community, we need to look at where the choke points are. And the choke point, for example, 1310. My colleague has mentioned that folks are still not released under that. So we have people actually right now today sitting in our correctional system that should be out. And because of the calculation, the issues with software, some of these people are still sitting in the prison. What the Oversight Bill does is it looks for issues like that. There were issues with locks, as we remember. There were issues with we had some folks that escaped a couple of weeks ago. These are all mounting issues, and then not to mention the lawsuits on top of a lot of these issues that are out there. So right now, my oversight bill costs less than the lawsuits that DOC is having to pay, and that's I got that information from my colleague Representative Rodriguez, so I was like, wow, I'll start using that. I'll start taking your stuff. But he's absolutely right. We spend more money on covering or trying to put a Band-Aid on a shotgun wound rather than fixing, the overall problem. And the problem right now is DOC needs to be looked at in order for these programs to work.
Yeah, I agree. The only other thing, of course, other than stating the obvious, which is various bills affect different families and different folks in different ways. And so to individual people, that some of them are more important than others. But I would say the only thing that I would add in addition to what has already been mentioned is there are a number of reporting bills that have also gone through as well. And that's important because as we get better data, then we can make better decisions. And that, I think you'd see that, I believe all of those were unanimous in terms of the way they passed the committee as well. So that's important because, again, you make bad decisions if you have bad intel to begin with. And so intelligence and a fair representation of what is actually happening within both the DOC and within the court system and the way prosecutors prosecute and all of that is very, very important in order to putting forward common sense criminal justice reform.
Yeah, thank you. And Representative Thoma, what's the bill number of the bill you mentioned earlier about the sealed records?
2320.
2320. Great, thank you. That's really, really helpful and fascinating. I know we've gotten in the weeds a little bit, but that's why we're here. We love the specifics of what you do and learning how we can work together to make a difference for Arizona's families. And so we did have a lot of questions in the chat, and I had a few more, but I know we're short on time. We did have one final question from Griselda Miranda, also from LD 27.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Griselda Miranda. Soy madre de 3 niños. Gracias por estar aquí hoy con nosotros hablando de este importante tema y esperemos que el trabajo pueda continuar y podemos cambiar el rumbo de muchos jóvenes en nuestro estado. La pregunta sería, ¿qué podemos hacer para ayudar a estos jóvenes?
Well, the first thing that I would ask is that you stay up to date on the issue. Make sure that you are in contact with your elected officials in your district. Let them know that you care about this issue. Let them know that you want to see things done on this issue. Continue to remind them that we are here to do the people's work. We serve the public. And part of that means helping families who are in crisis. So please just stay involved. Reach out to all of the elected officials that you can. Let them know that this is important to you. And also, if you have questions, call us. If you have an idea, call us and let us know. Work with us together because we're stronger when we have our constituents behind us.
I would echo that, and how you can help us is to make sure that we continue to get folks in here that are going to speak to this issue. one of the main reasons that I really like the job that Majority Leader Thoma is doing is because he's open-minded about these issues, and he is willing to listen to them and champion some of them. And we need to be able to, as a community, make sure that the folks that we are electing understand the gravity of this issue of criminal justice reform and all levels of the elections, where it comes to a judge or it comes to a prosecutor or what have you, or an elected official down here at the State House or in the Senate. And just being involved as you are, and going on the portal and signing to speak and talking about some of these bills, and then bringing some real life stories to the committees, so we can hear them and be able to make changes on them. So, and just continue to do what you're doing, asking those questions and being part of this forum. So thank you very much for the question, and I appreciate your support in the programming.
Gracias.
Thank you. I think Mr. Blackman hit it right on the head, which is stories are very important, and they're very powerful. And it's hard to argue with someone's story. You know, getting online and sending a mean tweet or putting something nasty on Facebook doesn't really help. It doesn't matter if you're trying to help, but it doesn't help when people do that. What does help is getting a real person coming in front of a committee, whether by Zoom or in person, and telling their story briefly, but telling their story concisely and saying, hey, this happened to me. Please help me with this. I think that moves me. And again, I say that as someone that hasn't personally dealt with the criminal justice system, nor do I have anybody in my family that has, in my immediate family that has. So, but it helps me, and I think it helps as you're seeing, the majority of our caucus. And actually, obviously Diego can talk about this as well, but the other caucus as well. So stories are powerful. Tell your story, reach out to everyone that represents you, and ensure that they hear your story. And I think that's really the best possible course of action at this point.
Thank you so much, Representative Thoma, Chairman Blackman, Representative Rodriguez. We are so grateful for your insight and time this morning. And to your points, we do have a training on the request to speak system that we'll be delivering. So look for information on that. Folks on Zoom and Facebook Live will show you how to do what they're talking about. Go into the system and share your view, share your story, and we'll continue to share your stories as well. We have one more stand date at the Capitol planned on Thursday, March 4th at 3 o'clock. It's going to be on safe and just schools. And so we hope you'll join us for that as well. But again, once more, thank you to our panel, and we'll have this posted on Facebook Live soon. Thank you so much and have a great day.